that again. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Shakia Cooper, and I work with Generation180, which is a national nonprofit. And so today's webinar is being hosted by a cohort called Toward Equitable Electric Mobility. And throughout this presentation and webinar, you will hear us refer to the cohort as team. Today's webinar will be focusing on everything you need to know about the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And then later in the webinar, I will introduce our guest speaker, Rachel with Evergreen, as she will be doing our presentation. Next slide. Okay, so for today's webinar, our cohort goal is to provide individuals and communities with information and resources on how to access federal funds with the IRA and the IIJA. So our agenda will be as followed. We will give you an overview of what the team cohort is. We will do an initial poll question survey. So we have 2 questions, just wanting to gain attendees baseline, gain clarity on what folks may know and their level of awareness before the presentation. And then we will kick it off and allow Rachel with Evergreen to go into doing her presentation, where she will give more information about the IRA and the IIJA. Then we will give time for questions. So the audience will be able to ask questions, and we have a few moderated questions as well. So during the presentation, if you find that questions arise, please pop them into the Q&A chat section, and we will queue those questions up during the Q&A. And then we will transition into closing out, which will be a closing out poll question, just asking how folks felt about the webinar today and what next steps will look like, and then we will close it out. Next slide. So what is TEAM, which is Toward Equitable Electric Mobility? The TEAM Community of Practice is a collaborative initiative between Fourth and Greenlining Institute. It is aimed at advancing equitable electric mobility. It is a multi-year and multi-state effort focused on promoting racial equity, electric transportation, and climate change goals. And so the TEAM cohort includes states of Colorado, Illinois, Michigan, North Carolina, and Virginia. Since we launched in January 2021, we have prioritized discussions on mobility equity, community building, and establishing a strong foundation for the initiative. So some of our national calls have featured presentations on mobility equity, electric school buses, and more. While state calls have basically focused on understanding the priorities of each participating organization within their specific state context. And so throughout the remainder of this year, TEAM will focus on topics such as operationalizing equity, exploring the historical and present relationship between transportation and race, and examining different electric mobility options that can better serve communities. And then the initiative aims to create learning opportunities and foster a sense of community among cohort members. And this can include equity, environmental justice, and traditional environmental and clean energy organizations. We are bridging gaps between these organizations, and so TEAM definitely aims to empower equity organizations to lead these conversations and establish shared priorities at both the state and national levels. As a cohort, we also seek to leverage emerging opportunities with the Biden administration. As federal funding and resources become available, we look to strengthen state networks and grounding ideas discussed at the national level. Our TEAM states can better utilize federal support to achieve more effective and equitable outcomes. And our ultimate goal of the TEAM community of practice is to make lasting impact and achieve significant progress in the field of equitable electric mobility. And so today's webinar will focus on how individuals and communities can access new federal funds under the Inflation Reduction Act and the new federal funding in your communities. After this webinar, we plan to follow up with the participants to share more information on funding programs of interest, and we'll also provide additional support to communities that are eligible for these funding programs, but may need assistance to access them. slide 4. So we're going to go ahead and kick off our poll questions. So we have 2. And question 1 is, before this webinar, have you ever heard of these federal funding programs, which is the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act? And then have you or your organization applied for grant funding for any of these programs? So in a moment, you will see these questions pop up on your screen or phone. We'll give a few more moments for attendees to answer the poll question. Okay, sorry, I think technical difficulty. So we launched the poll question that would have been at the end of the webinar. So give us 1 second. Okay, so here's the corrected question. Okay. So it looks like about 93% of our attendees today have some sort of idea of the federal funding programs that we'll talk about. And then a few folks are unaware, so there'll be opportunities to learn about today's funding. Okay, and then we will launch our second question. Okay, so it looks like great feedback. So some of attendees want to apply but are not sure which programs to apply for or how to apply. And a significant amount of attendees have not applied and don't currently have plans to. Next slide. Okay, so in just a moment, we will have Rachel Patterson come on camera and start our presentation. And so Rachel works with Evergreen. She is a deputy policy director at Evergreen and has worked on policy in the areas of climate and energy, clean transportation, and environmental justice. Prior to joining Evergreen, Rachel was at Environmental Advocates New York, where she supported policy development, analysis, and research, and engaged with state legislators and coalitions. Rachel also served as a fellow of the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, and briefly as a senior briefer for the office of Governor Andrew Cuomo. Rachel currently holds an MPA from Columbia University and a BA in Public Policy and Environmental Science from Mills College. Rachel is currently pursuing her JD at Albany Law School, and she is also active in her community, currently serving on the Albany Community Policy Advisory Committee and is a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Inc. Rachel has also served as an adjacent faculty member at Columbia SIPA. So welcome, Rachel, and thank you for joining us. I'll allow you to take it over.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk to everybody about the advantages of federal funding. So let's jump in. Next slide. Awesome. Let's just move on to the next slide. I do want everyone to know that while I have a lot of slides with a lot of information, the point of providing all this on the slide is not necessarily that you read through it all while I'm talking, but that this slide deck will be available to you, including the clickable links. So you'll be able to look back at this a little bit later if there's anything you didn't catch. And then of course, we're gonna do some Q&A. So just to set the stage for this, there are hundreds of billions of dollars available in federal investments between the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which I'll be calling the IIJA, and some people call it the BIL, and the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA. There's over $400 billion available to address climate change over the next decade. And some of those programs will be in buildings, transportation, clean energy development, and reducing air pollution. And then there are some really exciting opportunities to build community resources as well. This money is going to be available in a variety of ways. The majority of the funds are going to be through tax credits, and I'll break that down towards the later part of my slides. But a lot of the funds that are going to be directly available to communities are going to be more through state formula funds and grants. Next slide, please. Great. And so many of you likely know about this already, but it's just important at the top of this for me to explain really quickly the Justice40 Initiative. This administration created a goal called the Justice40 Initiative, which attempts to provide 40% of the benefits of climate change and clean energy related investments to disadvantaged communities. There's a really important distinction that when we're talking about this, we really do mean benefits and not literal dollars or investments. So benefits can look wide ranging and may look like new jobs or new infrastructure, new clean energy investments, updates to homes and retrofits, etc. So every program is going to have different benefits, and that's really important to understand. Next slide, please. So just at a high level, I wanted to break this up because I think that the ways that individual people benefit might be a little bit different than the ways that communities benefit. So individual taxpayers and residents can benefit in three key ways. By directly applying for tax incentives after purchasing clean energy investments, getting some of that money back. The second way is that separate from tax incentives, there are rebates that states will have control over. And if you qualify for that, you can receive those benefits. And then the third way is that, investments will be made in communities, in disadvantaged communities in particular, and folks should be benefiting from the community improvements. Next slide, please. And it's just a little bit different for communities, especially if your community is considered disadvantaged. But there are three main ways that communities will benefit as well. So nonprofits are eligible for many of the funds within both the IRA and the IIJA, and nonprofits can directly apply for those programs and shape how those projects look and where they're implemented. The second way is that community organizations can and should engage with state and local agencies and encourage them to apply for programs, for the grant programs, and for the tax credits. And then those community organizations can work alongside the government entities that they engage with to make sure that the programs are being rolled out in the way that best serves their community. And then the third way is through getting benefits. In particular, if your community is considered disadvantaged, there's a federal mapping tool, which the link is in here, that you can look and see if your community is, and if so, you should expect to receive around 40% of those benefits. And those are things that community members can track and should track to make sure they're happening. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to dig into just some of the high-level grant programs that every community, should be considering, and then I will move on to the tax credits. I also should just preface and say that I know this webinar is titled Everything You Need to Know About IIJA and IRA. There are hundreds of programs across those two pieces of legislation, and this webinar most particularly focuses on the IRA, but there are links and resources at the end that will provide a more comprehensive list of programs you can engage in under both of those federal pieces of legislation. So sorry for that interlude, getting back to the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. So this is an IRA program, and it provides $27 billion in grants to invest in zero emission technologies and activities that reduce emissions. And the whole point of this program is to provide incredible flexibility so that communities can implement the projects and programs that make the most sense for their community. Not every community is going to need the same thing. And this funding, this grant is broken up into 3 different funding opportunities. I'm going to skip over the first 2 in the interest of time and really focus on the Solar for All competition, which is how lower income, disadvantaged communities and individuals will likely benefit the most. So the Solar for All competition is $7 billion that is only allowed to be invested in disadvantaged communities. And that money is going to be spent on residential and community solar. And so this is really important because many of the tax incentives are not necessarily available to lower income folks and folks from disadvantaged communities. And this program will directly work to get those investments installed in these communities. It's really important to note that all of this money, so how this program works, the Solar for All competition, essentially nonprofits, states, tribes, and local governments are all eligible to apply. And how it works is that EPA will select one of those entities in every state to run the entire program in that state. So it's going to be really important to track who gets that award in your state. Make sure you develop a relationship with them and understand how those residential or community solar programs are actually getting implemented in your community. Funds from this program are going to start to become available at the end of this summer. And all of the money has to be spent by September 2024. So this is a really tight program and definitely one to keep your eye on. Next slide, please. This other program is one of my favorites, the Environmental and Climate Justice Block Grants. This is kind of a new style of program for the federal government. Really, the goal of this program is to provide $3 billion directly to communities. Nonprofits are the only organizations that are eligible to get this money. So businesses are not eligible, states, etc., only nonprofits, because the goal is that the money would be spent in each community based on the community's vision for how to reduce emissions. And projects must directly benefit low-income and disadvantaged communities. They can be in a variety of in shapes and forms. So the projects can reduce pollution or mitigate health risks associated with climate change. So like, heat deaths, etc. The projects can expand climate and resiliency and adaptation programs, invest in workforce development, reduce indoor air toxics, and improve engagement with communities. That last piece is really important. So what that means is that communities can, for example, put together a proposal that would help them improve their relationship with their local government so that they can do more rooftop solar, for example. And this is really exciting because we don't often see the federal government acknowledging that it's really hard for communities to engage on a local and state level, particularly if they have been historically marginalized. Similar to the last program, this money is coming out pretty quick. It's going to start coming out at the end of this summer, and all the money needs to be spent by September 2026. So again, this is an important program to keep your eye on. It's a short timeline, but it can be really impactful because it will be completely community-led and driven projects. Next slide, please. Great. So now, as I mentioned, I'm going to transition to talk a bit more about the tax credits in particular. And again, I'm going to be focusing on the high level. So really the first bullet point here, but wanted to provide all of this information so that you can go back later and look at it. So Also important for me to state before we get into the tax credits, as I mentioned, tax credits unfortunately are not available for everyone. Tax credits are only accessible for people that have tax liability. And what that means is that you need to have a certain amount of income to be able to, when you file your taxes, to be able to get money back. And so, yeah, how the tax credits work is that you need to actually buy the, whether it's a home upgrade or a car, you need to actually buy the asset. And then in the next year, in the year of the tax return that you bought it, you need to claim that. So obviously this isn't available for many low income people or anyone with, with a different tax filing status. But essentially, the energy efficiency home improvement credit is going to provide up to $3,200 for energy efficiency upgrades in homes with a heat pump. And then you'll see on this slide, it lists out exactly how much money you can get for each of these different types of improvements. And this credit is something that folks can start claiming now and can claim through 2032. And it can be used by homes that are owned by the person who lives in the home, but it can't be used by homeowners that rent their property out. So if you, own an Airbnb or something, you can't take advantage of that. Next slide, please. This one is pretty similar, residential clean energy credit. It gives 30% back for the investment of a residential clean energy piece of equipment like solar, electric hot water, wind energy, geothermal, or battery storage. And you'll see on the slide that there is a specific amount of energy that equipment you buy has to produce to be able to claim the credit. And this credit is available through 2034. And also on the slide, it explains that the credit decreases in value over time. So it really is best if you have the ability to try to claim this credit sooner rather than later. Next slide, please. The next one is a clean vehicle credit. So many states have something similar, but this is just the federal government providing a tax credit of up to $7,500 to individuals who purchase a new clean vehicle. And it is important to note that there are some restrictions around that. The up to part is really important because it depends whether or not the vehicle was manufactured in North America and some workforce and labor and wage components around that. But basically what you need to know is that you may qualify for the credit if you make less than $150,000 a year, or as joint filers, less than $300,000. And if this is something that you are interested in, when you go to the dealership, they will know all of those specifications and how you can get the maximum value of the credit. Also important to note that this credit can be stacked on top of state incentives. So if your state does have an incentive, you can get potentially more than $75,000 off of that value. Next slide, please. This next one is new and really excited to see how many people take advantage of this. It's a credit for the purchase of a used clean vehicle. And mostly we're talking about electric vehicles here, but it provides a tax credit of up to $4,000 for someone who buys a used EV. And again, there are requirements. An individual must make $75,000 a year or less, or $150,000 for joint filers. And then there are some specifications about the year of the car has to be at least 2 years. The car has to be at least 2 years old by the time that you claim the credit. And it must be purchased from a dealer, so not like a third party. And yeah, this credit will also be available for several years to come. Next slide, please. And then I'd like to, as I mentioned, tax credits are for those who have tax liability and can do that. That's great. But there are also a couple state programs where the federal government gives money to states based on the state population and a couple other factors. And then the state is going to be able to run some programs that provide rebates to folks. So this first one is the high efficiency electric home rebate, it's $4.5 billion overall. So each state will be getting just a slice of that. And states will be able to establish homes rebate programs to give homeowners whole house energy retrofits. A single family home can receive a rebate of up to $4,000, whereas a multifamily home can receive a rebate of up to $40,000. But the specific rebate amounts and the eligibility requirements will be determined by each state. States have not released any information about that, but keep your eye on this program because it's expected that more information is going to be available towards the later half of this year. Next slide, please. The next rebate program that states will be implementing is the Home Energy Performance Rebate. Again, that's $4.3 billion overall, so each state is going to get a slice of that. And it's really similar to the last one. It provides funds to help develop retrofit programs that will lead to energy savings for homeowners. And rebates, again, will be available to both single family and multifamily housing. And rebates in this case are going to be determined based on the income level. And again, states will be implementing them. So we don't exactly have a timeline yet. But again, keep your eye on this because we have until 2031 to get the money out the door here. And I think that's all I had on rebates. Next slide, please. And then taking just a big step back, as I mentioned at the very beginning, tax credits are the majority of the money available in the Inflation Reduction Act. And it's really exciting, although not everyone can access tax credits, it's really exciting that for the first time, municipalities, states, tribal governments, and nonprofits, as well as some other entities like rural co-ops, will also be able to take advantage of tax credits. And that's a really big deal because in the past, these entities have not been able to do it. And essentially, tax credits usually give roughly 30% of the value of the project back, which means that way more local and state governments will be able to actually take advantage of some of these programs. I'm saying all this because it's really important for advocates to be able to go to their local government or their state government or their tribal government and say, hey, I know that these programs are available. I know that we can be investing in clean energy. What's our plan to make that happen? And so the credits that I've listed here are all ones that local, state, and tribal governments and nonprofits can take advantage of. And there's this really important provision called elective pay, which allows these entities like tribal, local, state governments and nonprofits to actually get the tax credit in the form of cash rather than getting it back in taxes because these entities don't pay taxes, right? So we have a blog about that from Evergreen that just came out today, which explains the concept a little bit more, but really just wanted to highlight that at a high level because this is going to be one of the ways that communities can directly unlock access to clean energy investments rather than waiting for a private company to create solar panels in their neighborhood. Nonprofits can go do that for themselves, or nonprofits can advocate for their local or state government to be doing that in their community. Next slide. So I think that brings me to the end of the programs that I meant to talk to you all about today, but I would encourage you to go look at these links. Many of them are for IIJA programs as well, many of which have like active and ongoing deadlines. So yeah, without wanting to take up too much time, I'll pass it back.
Thank you, Rachel, for your presentation. It was so insightful, and I'm really excited to get into these audience questions because we had some great ones come in. Before we kick off to the audience, we're going to ask a few of our own questions, be a little greedy here. We were curious what the best way for local governments to learn more about these programs and find more information to get help applying. Is it a one-stop shop or specific website they can be looking out for?
Yeah, that's the tricky part. Unfortunately, there is not an easy answer to this. I wish there were a one-stop shop for all of this information. I think the best place that local governments can go to look, I don't know if my slides are still up, but if you go to the second to last slide, there is a link there for the White House the IRA guidebook from the White House. The White House put one out on the IRA and the IIJA. If you click on those, you can actually search by program and it will tell you who's eligible for what. So that's a great resource for local governments to start off and see which programs can I apply for and which are the most high impact that I might want to invest in. So that's where I would point folks to.
Awesome. Thank you so much. As a follow-up to that, as you mentioned, these are unprecedented dollars and everybody wants to go after them. So when local governments are applying to these opportunities, how can they make their applications more competitive? And specifically, what criteria or considerations will be used to prioritize funding applications or proposals? I know it's probably different by agency.
Yeah, so not only is it different by agency, but actually every single one of these programs is different. As far as who's eligible, what's required in the application, and what you should do for your application. I guess I will say that EPA in particular has gotten a lot better at, oftentimes they will actually post like the expected application a little bit in advance, which gives folks some time to see like, okay, what's in the application? What should I be looking at? And I know for the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, for example, they list in there, here are 3 programs that we're focused the most on. If your application touches one of these, you're more likely to get it. And similarly for the EJ Block Grant Program, they actually list in the application, if you're able to collaborate with 2 or more other entities, we will be looking at your application more heavily. So really try to read and pick up on some of those things. And that can help you understand if you even want to apply in the first place, right? Because if they're going to prioritize transportation programs and you have a totally separate interest, then maybe that's not the program for you. And then I will also drop in the chat, but as far as making criteria or considerations that will make your application most competitive, I would say as much as you can, really try to work with a technical assistance provider. There are some free, there are some organizations that provide free services to help you with your application. And one of them, for example, is Anthropocene Alliance. Another one is the Environmental Protection Network, which is a group of folks who used to work at the EPA and are now retired and specialize in that. So I can provide some links. And then for folks who represent tribal or indigenous communities, there's an indigenous network of folks who provide technical assistance there. I would encourage you to get with those folks because they know exactly how to make your application the most competitive and can help you save time because these applications can be really cumbersome.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you. That's a whole host of resources. I'm excited to check them out myself. We'll throw one more at you ourselves before we turn over to the audience. How can individual residents make sure to take advantage of these funding opportunities? The tax credits, the rebates. Is there a similar question for the local communities? Like, is there a website or place, or is it similar to it being scattered about?
Yeah, and unfortunately, it is similar. I would say though, for local communities, in addition to looking at stuff like the IRA resource guide, I think the best thing to do would be to like try to make that link with whatever agency you think is going to implement the thing that you're most interested in. If you're interested in transportation, go start talking to your local, Department of Transportation, your local transportation agency, because they might already have ideas. Also, they might already have ideas that you don't like or don't think work for your community. So I would definitely say that that's the best place to start.
Awesome. So what I'm hearing is relationship building is really important in getting some of these applications in. I'm curious, do you have any relationship building tips in all your years of expertise?
I would say my only tip is that people are much more willing to talk to you than you think they might be. So I've definitely just emailed people on a whim and said, hey, do you know about this program? Can I, people in local government tend to be really busy, but they also love to be engaged. So my only tip would be use your resources, do your Googling, but don't be afraid to just pick up the phone and see if someone wants to meet with you, because oftentimes those initial conversations can go a long way in helping understand how to get your community the resources it needs.
So thank you. So we have some great audience questions coming in. So I'm going to kick it over and read some of those off. So the first one that came in is about used vehicle tax credit. Is it only for the first resale, or are all dealer initiated sales eligible? I think I'm understanding that question correctly.
Yeah, there are some, I don't want to get this wrong, but there are some considerations around that. I think, let me see here. The vehicle, the whole intent behind that program is just that they don't want multiple people to be getting the same credit for reselling the vehicle. So my understanding is that even if it's not from a dealer, it can only be resold once in that credit opportunity. So I hope that answered that question.
So thank you so much. Another one about the clean vehicle credit. So will the clean vehicle credit become an instant rebate rather than a tax credit in the near future?
Yeah, so the rebatability, I guess, is really dependent on the dealer. So even now, it is possible to get a rebate rather than a tax credit, but that depends on the specific dealer that you go to, and you can just simply ask them if they're willing to take off the value of the car at the time of purchase.
Great, thank you so much. If those energy upgrades were installed in 2023, are they eligible for the tax credits in 24?
So that's the tricky part. You need to make the investment in the same year that you plan to claim the credit, in the same tax year that you plan to claim the credit. And that's true for all of the credits.
Mm-hmm. Great point, great point. So let's see, next one coming in is local match requirements. Are they often a hurdle for communities to take advantage of many of these funding programs from the federal government? And do you have any advice for solving that problem about matching requirements?
Yeah, that's a huge, I cannot even underscore how big of a deal that is. And just for folks who might not be in the weeds, what that means is that a lot of times federal programs will provide 80% of the total cost and leave that 20% to the local community to figure out. This can be really, really hard for communities that just have lower budgets, or for example, tribal governments who need to be spending money on day-to-day things rather than long-term investments, right? And so this has been something that I know my organization has been thinking about a lot. And I would say that it really depends on the program. So something that we're seeing, for example, I track really closely some electric vehicle programs, and we're seeing that many states are just asking private contractors if they're willing to make up the difference. And states can create incentives, for example, providing contracting and then, asking private contractors to make up that 20%. And then in exchange, the state will say, okay, great, but you have to hire a certain percentage of people from here, right? Or it has to be a union contract. So there are some ways to get creative about that. I will admit though, that simply having private investors make up the difference is a challenge, because if it's a community project, you do lose some of that community autonomy. But that's definitely an option. It might also be worthwhile to get creative about some of these. For example, DOE has a bunch of loan guarantee opportunities through the IRA. It might be worthwhile to get creative about how to leverage some of those loans to cover the cost of other projects. I'm not sure on all of the logistics there because I haven't been able to look into that too much, but those are two places where I'd start.
Awesome, thank you, thank you. So we're gonna do two more questions and then kick it over to our closing poll. So next one is, what advice would you give to folks who want to encourage their elected officials to apply for money who are in more conservative areas?
Yeah, that's such a great question. My response to that, I will give a caveat that I'm a Californian who lives in upstate New York, so take that with a grain of salt. Although there's more conservatives in those places than you would expect. And what I try to do is always just humanize the impact of these programs and make it about the values of your community or your state, right? So yes, clean energy investments are a good idea because climate change is a huge problem, but they're also a good idea because right now our grid isn't very reliable. Right now, people are paying too much for energy. Right now, there's air pollution problems in many communities, right? And so I think a lot of these investments can be justified with so many other real world concerns. And once you identify what the value is to that elected official, then you can start to create, like, at my organization, we create like specific talking points, right, for those kinds of meetings and things like that. So that's how I would frame it. I come to the climate world from really the understanding that, like, at the end of the day, people are what's most impacted here. Yes, the climate crisis is happening, but why we care about that is because people are impacted. And so the more you can drive that home, and the other thing that people love is jobs. And these programs will create jobs in many, many communities. And so as long as people are open to the fact that those jobs mean clean energy, then you have your foot in the door there.
Yeah, it's a great point. Thank you. The last question comes straight from me. So yesterday we were talking about the need for communication with utilities in planning some of these projects, especially when thinking about clean school buses or fleets. We've heard specific utilities having to turn away folks because they don't have the necessary juice, I'll say, to power these large scale projects. Do you have any advice on when and how to loop them in and what that might look like?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think the utility engagement one is also, like, not only is it different in every state, but it's different based on like what the reality of the resource mix is in your state. Like you said, like some utilities say they don't have enough gas or power for different things. I think there it starts with like really understanding the reality of why they're saying that. Is it because it's expensive? Is it because there are some real hurdles? So we've seen that in some states, the grid just isn't reliable enough to take on new energy systems, and some small tweaks to how the grid is being managed might be able to change that. So I would say, like, try to identify like what the actual root cause is. Sometimes it's just political, right? But sometimes it's a real technical or infrastructure issue. And once you identify that, you can try to find like the appropriate programs that tailor to that. There's a lot of IRA and IIJA money for grid updates, for example. So if you do talk with your utility and they say that this is the problem, well, then let's have a conversation about how you can get this money and how we can work together to solve that. So I would also say, like, I know that utilities just get a bad rap in a lot of places. And I would say just like try to walk into those conversations with an open mind, try to loop them in earlier than later, because they're also just trying to get people energy for the most part, just like many advocates are.
Awesome. Thank you. That was great. Awesome. So we got a lot of great questions. Thank you all for your interest and your input. We will be able to answer a few of those via email. We've got them all in our chat, so don't fret. Now we're going to ask the audience 3 more questions quickly through a poll. This is going to help us understand how helpful today's webinar was to you all and give us an insight into what topics and funding opportunities that you're most interested in, so that we can follow up with you and provide more support and resources so that you can get those dollars. Ultimately, our goal in team is to support a handful of communities to be successful in applying for and getting access to these federal funds. So yeah, gonna close out the poll. It should be on your screen now. All right, we got about 66% participation, but it seems to be leveling off. So I'm going to go ahead and share our results. So, yay! 96% of folks found this informative, and we will get to the bottom of that somewhere. Next question, stop sharing. All right, seems like we're leveling off here on 61% participation, and it's pretty even across the board, but leaning heavier on tax credits for individuals and tax-exempt orgs and the EPA climate justice block grants. So that's great to know, and we will definitely be following up on those. Next question. Oh, sorry, I don't know if I shared the results. There's the results. All right. Next question. All right. So the results are on the screen. Pretty even mix with some interest in transit and bus shuttles, as well as personal EVs and charging infrastructure. Thank you all for your feedback. We really appreciate it. This is so helpful for us, and we will be following up, as I said. So thank you. I'm so sorry, I keep forgetting to share the results. Awesome. Well, let me stop sharing those. And lastly, we want to thank Rachel and Evergreen Collaborative for your efforts outlining these programs and presenting on them today. We're excited to continue collaborating with you all to ensure the public and especially frontline communities that we understand and want to help them understand the IRA, the IIJA, and how to take advantage of these unprecedented dollars in this pivotal moment. We want to thank the participants for your attention and thoughtful questions. We look forward to reviewing them all and your poll responses and following up with you with more information soon. So thank you all and take care.
Thank you so much. I just want to share that I did drop those links for the technical assistance resources in the chat.
Thank you so much, Rachel. All right, thank you all.